tuned into the truth frequency.
Your protection from deception. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. Oh yeah, good evening. Welcome everyone. This is Phoenix. Hope you're doing well. It is Tuesday, March 27th, 2018. Oh yeah, a lot going on. I hope you had a good weekend. Hope things are warming up for you if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, I hope you enjoy a nice autumn. I hope it is not a harsh winter for you that's approaching, but we have spring and summer approaching here in the Northern Hemisphere, and things are heating up. Things are getting warmer, and they will heat up in all kinds of ways. And we're going to be talking about some interesting things here this evening. I'll be joined here by NeSe, and we are going to be discussing something that may surprise a lot of you. What do ancient Hopi prophecies, Ed Dames, the kill shot, the remote viewer, military remote viewer, and the Chinese space program have in common? Well, they have a lot in common. We're going to talk about those things this evening because we have some news that's happening that's tying in with some of the ancient Hopi prophecies and also remote viewing. So it's actually a case where the matrix of information is melding together and coming, what is factual information is melding with the other, if you know what we mean. Anyway, I can hear that we have NeSe joining us. What you doing there, NeSe? Throwing things around the house or something?
Oh, I'm about to, Phoenix. I'm having a NeSe's Law Day because I refuse to call it Murphy's Law because of my dear friend Marcus Murphy of Wookiefoot. So I now call it NeSe's Law, where I've had a day of anything and everything that can go wrong with my computers is occurring. And just before the show, for some unknown reason, my Skype would not go into my headset and kept going through my monitor. And so my attendant was here and we're scrambling, trying to figure out what occurred. And we finally got something back to some kind of normalcy for my world. But here we are again.
Yeah. It sounds like classic Mercury retrograde, problems with electronics and things like that. And I tell you what, there's crazy stuff happening in the world right now in the news. You know, a lot of people are all distracted by what's going on here in the United States. Big stories, the real big stories, are what happened just yesterday on the 26th when we had the Chinese launch the Petro Yuan trading system. You know, we talked about this before. We are based here in the United States on the petrodollar system, and that is all changing. The last time we had nations that were openly trading their own currency or other nations' currencies other than the dollar, and they said they were going to do so, it didn't turn out too well. One being Saddam Hussein. He declared that he would only sell Iraqi oil in euros. Shortly thereafter, we invaded Iraq, and shortly thereafter, he swung from a rope, and that plan went that way. Then we had Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, and he was going to launch the gold dinar, and it was going to be a currency of Northern Africa, of Libya, and other nations, backed by gold, and they were going to trade and only buy and sell gold in that currency, and that was the end of Muammar Gaddafi. Now, the Chinese have done it, and they've done it successfully. They launched the gold-backed yuan oil trading platform just this Monday with great success. Billions and billions of dollars poured in, and this basically is the death knell for the U.S. dollar. So things are going to get funky, things are going to get weird, and you know, it could go one way or the other. The other big story, other than the big story NeSe and I are going to get to here in a moment, which this all ties in together, is that we have the nations of the world coming together, not all the nations of the world, but primarily NATO and the West, coming against Russia, expelling diplomats, throwing them out of the country, and making all these claims because of this alleged chemical attack that allegedly Russia did in England, in the UK, to kill a former spy. But the problem with this is no one will give any of the evidence up. And one of the attending doctors said absolutely not. It was not deadly nerve agent, because she said she would have died also. She treated the man right after he fell ill at the place where he fell, and his daughter. Other people were around. There were some people affected, but no one has died. And this nerve agent, they're saying that it was, a Russian, Soviet nerve agent. They're refusing to give any samples. They're refusing to work with the United Nations, because Russia has come forward and said, okay, we want the evidence. We want to go through the United Nations, check this, and this. And the UK is refusing. The United States is refusing. All nations are refusing. They're saying, oh, no, we're not going to give you any evidence, and we're not going to check it out through the chemical agencies because you did this, and it's a horrible thing. It's a chemical attack. So it's a BS lie that they've set up to go against Russia. And
is that like the weapons of mass destruction that were in Iraq?
Exactly. And that's what they're going for. But see, they're going to tie this stuff into Syria. They want to kick this thing off in Syria. And Idlib, which is a section of northern Syria, the Russians came out just today and made another claim and a warning that the terrorists there are getting ready to launch another false flag event, like a chemical attack. Now, they had warned about this in eastern Ghouta, but now they say they're going to try it again in northern Iraq. So they're warning about this right now, that this could potentially happen. I was looking at the article a little bit earlier. Let me see if I can find it. I thought it was on Sputnik, but it's not. Hang on a second. Let me run over to my other feed here. Anyway, NeSe, how's it going, man? What's happening up in your part of the world before we get into everything tonight?
Well, life is continuing on as it usually does, with its ups and downs, and the weather and its strangeness. We just had some snow yesterday, and now we're back up to 40 degrees, and it's all melting, and they're talking about snow coming in again. But it's not too strange for us to have snow in April, and I do recall at one point we had snow in May here in the northern tundra.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading right here. Yeah, and we may have one more big winter storm. China is the world's biggest crude consumer and buys most of its oil from Russia. However, most settlements are still in U.S. dollars. The launch of the petro yuan now allows Moscow and Beijing to use national currencies instead. China and Russia are actively reducing dependence on the dollar and bilateral trade. In October of 2017, Beijing launched a payment system for transactions in yuan and Russian rubles. This means that settlements for Russian oil deliveries to China, which have reached 60 million tons per year, can be done without using the dollar. After Monday's launch of the yuan-backed oil futures in Shanghai, there have been negotiating between Russia and China on mutual promotion of oil futures in national currencies. RIA Novista reported that in 2016, the St. Petersburg Exchange in Russia launched Urals oil futures in Russian ruble, and support from China could prop up Russian crude. China's new oil benchmark had a highly successful debut on the first day of trading in Shanghai. 62,500 contracts with more than 62 million barrels of crude traded for a national value, a notational value of nearly 27 billion yuan. That's 4 billion US. Zero Hedge reported. And so then it goes on. But yeah, it is picking up, and this is why we could potentially see warfare. They've been trying to get something going in Syria, and I tell you what, it's all like lined up for the classic Armageddon type thing going on. Now,
well, isn't in Syria, wasn't there a certain thing about a pipeline that the United States wanted to come through or go around or have something to do with Syria about 6-7 years ago?
Oh, it's been, yeah, a little bit longer than that, in fact. Now, Syria, and this is a little education for everybody out there. Syria was an ally of the United States for many years. And the leader, Assad, the current leader of Syria, which has been voted in multiple times by his people love him, he was seen and touted as a model Middle Eastern leader. He speaks English. He's eloquent. He's a beautiful wife. I think she's from like the UK. And as a matter of fact, John Kerry and John Kerry's wife used to consider themselves dear friends with the Assads. And they used to meet in Damascus and have dinners. And John Kerry and Assad were very good friends. He used to call him.
And that's John Kerry of the Skull and Bones.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. And he said that my dear friend Assad. And so they were close friends, and they were an ally. And he used to be, Assad was interviewed on TV here in the United States many times about all of his views. And he was like lifted up as like this great guy. Well, he never changed. Assad never changed, and he never changed from being a good ruler for his people, and his people loved him. What changed? Here's what changed. The United States went to Syria and said, we would like to have this pipeline that runs across Syria over to the ocean, the Mediterranean there, and was going to be a joint project between the United States and Saudi Arabia, this big oil and gas pipeline. And they went to Assad, and Assad said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And you know, everybody says Assad's a dictator. No, he's the president. So the president of Syria, Assad, took the proposal from the United States to the parliament of Syria, to the governing bodies, just like the United States, you know, where the Congress and Senate have to vote on things because we don't have a dictator president. It's the same in Syria. So this went before the Syrian parliament, and they rejected it. They said, no, we don't want this on we don't want the Americans and Saudi Arabia running this pipeline through our property. No. And they got pressure from the United States to do it, and they just wouldn't do it. And it wasn't because of Assad. It was because of opposition from the elected ruling body in Syria. They just didn't want it. And so the next thing you know, all of a sudden, we have an uprising, okay? And this uprising, they said it was like a revolution to fight against the tyrannical Assad. So this whole BS about Assad being a tyrannical dictator and this evil ruler is 100% BS. It's BS. And the leaders of the United States know this. A lot of people in the media know this, the older ones. This is all bunk. They tried to go in and destabilize the entire nation of Syria, thinking that if they could take over the government, they could put in a regime that did their bidding because we were paying for the rebels, and then we get our pipeline through. It was all about oil and gas and money, and that's why this whole thing's going on. But what happened was Russia, when they saw what the United States did to Libya, and Putin took a lot of heat from that from his people when they saw Muammar Gaddafi, because he agreed to the no-fly zone, and it was a death warrant for the nation of Libya. So he said, we're not going to do this. And they have a warm water port into Taurus, the Russians do, and they've been good allies with Syria for a long time. So there is no way Russia is going to bow down and let this happen again to one of their allies. And so that's why there's so much opposition. And since now we have the petro yuan launching in China, the only thing that'll prop up the United States potentially is warfare. So, I'm looking for a false flag possibly over in Syria where they'll kick something off. But this will light into like a biblical type of apocalyptic thing because of all the nations that are over there. And we're talking nuclear powers, dude. And this fits right in with our topic tonight, I believe. And that's what we're going to get right into. If everybody wants to hear the current news of the day, blah, 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 you can find it everywhere. It's some of the same old. But what we're talking about right now is something that's happening. China has a space station. And I'm going to read this, and then we'll get into the other part of this. I'll let NeSe describe the other part of this. Chinese space station to unleash series of fireballs before crashing into Earth in days. The remains of an out-of-control Chinese space station are expected to light up the sky with fireballs before crashing down to Earth. China's defunct space station, named Taekwang-1, or the heavenly place, is expected to fall to Earth between March 30th and April 2nd, as latest estimates suggest. That's a pretty tight range. Most of the 8-ton space probe launched in 2011 should burn up in the atmosphere before crash landing, Chinese space officials say. China's space agency, CNSA, have never fully explained why Taekwang-1 ceased functioning on March 16th after reaching its, quote, final phase of life. According to space experts, the odds of being hit by debris from the rogue space station are astronomical, meaning the threat to human life is minimal. Nevertheless, Chinese scientists do not know where and when Taekwang-1 will crash, describing its time frame for re-entry as highly variable. Orbiting at about 27,000 kilometers, Taekwang-1 could re-enter the atmosphere anywhere between 43 degrees north and 43 degrees south latitudes. That includes large swaths of the planet. Quote, it is impossible to name the exact re-entry location at this stage, an official, who was not named, told China's Global Times newspaper. At particular risk in the northern hemispheres or northern parts of the United States, including Boston, Des Moines, Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Salt Lake City. And then there's a map of where all of this could hit. It could hit anywhere around the world. Florence, Italy, Morocco City, Sochi, Russia are also in the high-risk region. In the southern hemisphere, other cities which could be affected include Truwall, Argentina, Christchurch, New Zealand, and Sapporo, Japan. In the history of spaceflight, no casualties due to falling space debris has ever been confirmed, but witnesses may potentially see a series of fireballs streaking across the sky if the skies are clear, according to the head researcher of the Radio Astronomy Research Institute. It is now nearing its fiery demise as it gradually gets slowed down by the fingers of the Earth's upper atmosphere. Now, they're also saying it's the international community doesn't know what the craft is made of, and that makes estimating the danger more challenging, as hardened fuel containers could reach the ground while lightweight panels won't, he said. On September 14, 2016, China made an official statement predicting Taekwang-1 would re-enter the atmosphere in the latter half of 2017. Didn't happen. The Taekwang-1 spacecraft launched with the aim of using the aircraft to set up a larger space station And they did have astronauts up there, and it was inhabited a few times, I believe, by the Chinese. Now, it is going to come down in between the 3rd and what they say, the 2nd of April, and it will be burning up, and it is a dwelling place in the sky. That's what a space station is. Now, speaking of a dwelling place in the sky, this leads us to the Hopi prophecies of the Blue Kachina, which would be the 9th Hopi prophecy. And to cover all that, I'll let the Native American take it away. Go for it, NeSe.
Well, before we jumped into that, I wanted to bring up some really interesting things about the space station crashing. And this is speculation. However, if you look at what is currently happening right now with the change of exchange with the US dollar and oil, it's incredibly synchronistic that this is the time that this Chinese space station / laboratory is potentially going to crash. And supposedly it has some pretty dangerous chemicals and products on it that could really mess things up. Now, wouldn't it be rather interesting if all of a sudden under Operation Bluebeam, that here in the United States, there is a false flag, and in that false flag, there's a claim that there's more than just what the Chinese aren't telling us on the space station, which would be all of a sudden a possible declaration of war. If you remember that movie, Space Cowboys, with Indiana Jones, I just forgot his name, and some of the old good actors and stuff, where they went up and worked on a United States space satellite. And while they went there to do work on it, they found out that the space station was actually a platform for nuclear weapons. And I bring this up because you've heard me talk before about the synchronicities of art imitating life and life imitating art, art imitating life. A movie was just released on Netflix, and it was called The Cloverfield Paradox, where in the movie they somehow dimensionally shifted and came to a new Earth, where on this new Earth, a space station crashed, causing a world war to occur from the crash of this space station. And it was really ironic because when you called me, Phoenix, and we were talking about the topics of tonight, Buddy came over and we watched this Cloverfield paradox, and right there in the movie it said this statement of the space station crashing, and I took it for more than just synchronicities of what just occurred. However, the Blue Kachina talks about
before
you go ahead.
Before you get into the Blue Kachina, I also want to tell everyone that after you cover the Blue Kachina, we're going to bring something else too that ties into this, NeSe, and that is Major Ed Dame's kill shot. He's a remote viewer and was in the remote viewing program back in the day when the U.S. instigated that and started that program. And he actually had a vision about something called the kill shot that went hand in hand with a nuclear incident that happened on the North Korean peninsula and something that came from the sun, a solar event. But one of the indicators of that was the space station. They saw like a space station. They thought it was the ISS or something like that, actually came to Earth and had to be evacuated because it was going to fail and fall. And that was one of the precursors of the kill shot. And this all ties in. So anyway, continue on. We have about 2 minutes. I'll give you the heads up when we're rolling into the break.
Well, with the Hopi prophecy, it talks about how we're in the fourth world currently, and in in the prophecy of the Blue Kachina, they talk about a celestial event occurring, and within the time frame of this occurrence occurring, there is to be a catastrophic event that is going to usher us into the next world, or the new world. And if you go deeper into it and you get into the grandmother spider or Spider Woman stories, of where they talk about the Hopi were told to go within the earth to protect themselves from this catastrophic event, and then will be notified again when to come out, which is really ironic, because if you look at what the powers that should not be are doing, they are stocking up their dumb facilities, deep underground military bases. And this kind of correlates too with the prophecies of this occurrence of what is going to go down or potentially happen.
Now, this the Blue Kachina prophecy is the last of 9. There were 8 prior ones that have been fulfilled. And maybe when we come back, you can go over the first 8, and you can talk about the fulfillment of those, so people can kind of come up to speed and see why there's even relevance to this 9th one that they're saying happening, how this is all going to tie in. So maybe you could do that for everybody when we come back on the other side of the break, and people could get a grasp of how long these have been going on and how they have been fulfilled.
Oh, absolutely. And it's quite interesting, because not only, I'm slightly informed of the Kachina prophecies and stuff, but ironically, all of these prophecies correlate with the Anishinaabe prophecies also of this time period that we're in, where you've heard me talk about it before, the 7th fire, possibly going into the 8th fire prophecy.
Yeah. Hold that thought. Everyone, don't go away. We'll be into this one.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hey there, hi there, ho there, there we are, there you are, and we are here together. It is I, NeSe, along with Phoenix, during the Phoenix Rising Radio show. Thank you all for being here, and may we share enough knowledge, or a little speck of knowledge, to help you have some wisdom and not some wisdom. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being.
All righty. Yeah, the 9 Hopi prophecies. Do you have them at hand? If not, I have them right here in front of me. And then you can...
Well, why don't you go over it, and I'll just add to it what I know, because some of it's really basic that
that's
the fan
true.
is going to hit.
Yeah. A lot of people have never heard these. And what this was with the Hopis, it was the 4th world shall end soon, the 5th world will begin. This the elders know everywhere. And the first sign, and allegedly this was ancient prophecy that was handed down generation to generation. The first sign...
Well, should we start with where the Hopi were and stuff?
Sure, go ahead.
The Hopi natives were in the south, the southwest, southeast, kind of in the four corners, Arizona kind of area there. They were the descendants of the Toltecs and the Olmecs and the Pueblos. That's what they were called at the time. But they had many structures that are still around to this day of kivas and pueblos that there's been a lot of controversy on actually how old these are. Just like the Anishinaabe people that claim to have been here since the beginning, so is the claim of the Hopi people that they also have been here from the beginning, and they've had time periods of where they went into the earth to protect themselves during some of these cataclysmic events.
Okay, very good. Now, and this was their verbal tradition of these 9 signs. First sign says they were told of the coming of the white-skinned man, living like Piraha, but not living like Piraha, men who took the land that was not theirs and who struck their enemies with thunder, guns. The second sign, our lands will see the coming of spinning wheels filled with voices, and those were the covered wagons. That actually happened. Then the third sign was a strange beast like a buffalo, but with great long horns, will overrun the land in large numbers. And that would have been the longhorn cattle. Then the fourth sign, the land will be crossed by snakes of iron. And that came true with the railroad tracks. Then the fifth sign, the land shall be crisscrossed by giant spiders' webs. And that became made manifest with power and telephone lines, telegraph and the lines all over in the sky. Then the sixth sign they were looking for, the land shall be crisscrossed with rivers of stone that make pictures in the sun. And that was the concrete roads and asphalt roads that we have today that have the mirage producing effects and the heat. The seventh sign says you will hear the sea turning black and many living things dying because of it. And that, they say, is oil spills. Then the eighth sign, you will see many youth who wear their hair long like our people come and join the tribal nations to learn our ways and wisdom. And that was the hippies. And a lot of people, kind of tuned in and turned out, and they wanted to get back to nature and learn the old ways. And so that came true also in the late 60s and 70s. And then they have this. And this is the ninth and last sign. And again, these signs were an indication when the fourth world shall end and the fifth world will begin. The ninth and last sign, you will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens above the earth that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after, the ceremonies of the Hopi people will cease. And what I'm reading right there is in parentheses, and this was written quite some time ago. It says, is this a space station? Well, they are. This is a dwelling place. The Chinese space station is coming down in between the 30th of March, which is this Friday, or the 2nd of April. What is that? On Monday. So in between Friday and Monday, this thing is potentially going to crash. And could it light up the sky like a blue star? And could it look like a blue star when it's coming in? We'll just have to see. But it is a dwelling space in the heavens. That is going to fall, potentially with a great crash. And it says, it will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, the ceremonies of the Hopi people will cease. Then it goes on to say, these are the signs that the great destruction is here. The world shall rock to and fro. The white man will battle people in other lands. Okay, we're talking about possible warfare in Syria. Those who possess the first light of wisdom, there will be many columns of smoke. Oh, wait a minute. I read that wrong. The white men will battle people in other lands, those who possessed the first light of wisdom. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. That means like the cradle of civilization, ancient Sumer and that area of ancient Babylon, that's where the Syrian war is, in the place where the first light of wisdom was. It goes on to say, there will be many columns of smoke and fire, such as the white man has made in the deserts not far from here. Those who stay and live in the places of the Hopi shall be safe. Then there will be much to rebuild. And soon, very soon afterwards, Pahana will return. He shall bring with him the dawn of the fifth world. He shall plant the seeds of wisdom in our hearts. Even now the seeds are being planted. These shall smooth the way to the emergence of the fifth world, or the event. And that's the basis of this. So let's go on and get into this a little bit deeper.
Well, it is so interesting that, if we critically think about these prophecies and whatnot, that we can easily find correlations of what is occurring these moments of our existence. But the biggest challenge that I have is I really don't think we need any prophecies to know, if we critically scrutinize what's going on this moment, that things aren't going as they should in a positive direction. And that frustration that I always get with this is, why are we, generally speaking, as a people, so asleep to what really needs to be done? And my heart goes out, because as I try to find the answers to these tough questions, you realize that the powers that should not be have utilized their behavior modifications and their conditioning. And wait, people, there's nothing to listen to here. Go back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, well, there have always been very serious problems. But I think, and we've always been at times on the what looked like the brink of major world things happening, and they have happened. World War I, World War II, the Civil War. We can go through history, and there have been horrific events that have happened. But what I think about this, we do need prophecy because of timings of these events, because I think people are kind of burned out. I mean, look at the entire Cold War. The Cold War, oh my God, decades of any moment we're going to be in the brink of nuclear war. People got burned out on it. And the reason I think this prophecy is so important, because it could be an indicator for people to say, hey, wait a minute, this time's different. Because the interesting thing about this prophecy, and I read this Hopi prophecy 20 years ago, and it hasn't changed. It's still the same. And the interesting thing is that we have this space station coming down. If it burns blue like a star, it'll appear like a blue star. That'll be interesting. But the fact that it talks about that after this happens, the white man, that'd be America, the Americans, the USA, would be fighting overseas where the first light of wisdom was. Now, the fact that we're on the brink and the precipice of potential warfare in Syria, and all this, warlike talk with Russia and all of this, and like I said, this is the classic setup of the Armageddon scenario, because if we go even further into the Syrian thing, and the entire ancient Babylon, Sumner, Syria, and the fact that Israel's right there, and this is the 70th anniversary of Israel becoming a nation, which is a big deal also. They always have big things happen on their anniversaries, big anniversaries. And the fact that the book of Revelation talks about the apocalypse, the Battle of Armageddon, that happens in the plains of Megiddo. That's where Armageddon is. And that's in northern Israel, southern Syria. It's right there. And there's a lot of U.S. forces in that area right now, and Israeli forces. And there's a high degree of probability that if the warfare really took off, and all the nations that are there right now, I mean, we have an international coalition there. We have Turkey in there. We have all, Russia, United States, France, the UK. Everybody's right there with all this heavy armament. And if Russia and Syria retaliated and rolled down towards Israel, there would be a massive land battle right on the plains of Megiddo, which is Armageddon. The plains of Megiddo or the Battle of Armageddon. So that would fulfill greatly this prophecy of the Hopi and the blue kachina. But the thing about it is, it says after the blue kachina, there's a red kachina, also a red star. But they're saying after this that their ceremonies would cease. And how does this tie in with what your ceremonies are teachings of a new world? Because I was watching something right before I went to set the studio up and get ready to go here tonight about something called the event that people are picking up through hypnosis and stuff, and it ties in with all of this, dude. I think the value of this prophecy is that it might give us all a heads up that things are going to change, but I don't want people to be fearful of this, because this has to happen. This is the game board being kicked over. This is things being greatly disrupted, but and you have constant frustration about this, NeSe. I'm always trying to say, hang in there. A lot of people are at their wits' end how all of this changes. And maybe it changes in a supernatural way that has to come with what would appear to be a cataclysmic event, Earthside, because even the Hopi say afterwards it'll be better. It will be better afterwards. Maybe this is what we need.
Well, to say that, I'm frustrated with the situation that it is, but to say that I'm in an attitude of hopelessness isn't true, because I believe that there is no beginning and there is no end. And when you shed your body, that's not a bad thing. It just is on to the next adventure. And so if something happens to where it's cataclysmic, because, the asteroid belt that once was a planet, that was a huge event that occurred. And it just shows us that there is the possibility that planets can go boom. And so if we want to be rather severely truthful with ourselves, if we don't collectively say this is our 0 point, or this is where we need to move forward in a positiveness, then there is greater possibility to go down further the negative path, because things can get better and things can get worse. But the biggest thing is to be the action, to be the choice to make the better.
That's true. We all have choices how we deal with situations, react with situations. But again, back to the potential of seeing the 9th prophecy of the blue kachina being fulfilled, I think that's a good thing. But again, it comes with some really rough territory. And, it talks about the Hopi will be safe if they are in the place, the old places. And basically it talks about being away from populated areas. That's what this is talking about. And, I don't want to bum anybody out if you're in a populated area, but, they're always at risk. This comes down to sustainability also, and it talks about going back to the old ways. And I don't know. I see this as a very, very interesting convergence of a lot of different potentials here. Number one, the possibility of the blue kachina being fulfilled, and also going over to the Ed Dames thing. Now, we have had Dr. Courtney Brown on Phoenix Rising Radio a few times, and I should have Dr. Brown on again. And his remote viewing team. As a matter of fact, we've had 2 of the best remote viewers in the world on Phoenix Rising Radio. Dick and Daz from Farsight Institute have both been here, and they are just like premier, some of the best in the world, hands down, well known. And remote viewing is some pretty amazing stuff. Now, Major Ed Dames, he was in the military, United States military. And let me pull some stuff up about him. He's the world's foremost remote viewing teacher, creator of technical remote viewing. He was a United States Army 3 times decorated military intelligence officer, an original member of U.S. Army prototype remote viewing training program. And he served as both training and operations officer for the United States government's top secret psychic espionage unit. And he had a pretty interesting thing happen. They did a viewing, something that they called the kill shot. And this comes into play right now because of what's potentially happening with this space station falling. And what is the kill shot? Let me read a little snippet here. During the top secret remote viewing by the CIA and U.S. Army research program, trained viewers that were normally tasked with foreseeing the outcome of war-related events beginning to pick up on future occurrence that appeared to mark a dramatic shift in global life, kind of like the Blue Kachina type change. At first, these viewers, along with Major Ed Dames, the program's senior operations and training officer, had feared their subconscious was foreseeing nuclear war. It turns out that after years of remote viewing sessions, the event is in fact a series of solar events that are so devastating to the Earth, it may cause the death of billions and change life on Earth as we know it. Normally, one might not take such a warning seriously, but what sets this prediction apart from others is that the remote viewers have a track record of being amazingly accurate regarding globally recognized disasters and events. Now, one of the things that they said during the kill shot, that there would be one of the two precursors. One would be that a space station would fall and fall to the Earth. It would be catastrophic failure. And that was one thing that they saw. They didn't know if it was like this, our space station, the ISS. They didn't know if it was the shuttle program, but they saw a dwelling place in the sky, like a space station or this a space shuttle or something that had to come down. People could not be there because it was failing. And so that was one thing they saw. Then they saw a nuclear event that happened on the Korean Peninsula, and then the kill shot. So that kind of relates with this too, a big Earth altering event, kind of like the Hopi talked about. I don't know. What do you think, man?
Well, as we go through the progression of these events happening, they kind of do this ebb and flow where it's kind of a little event and then a bigger event. And then it comes back to a little bit bigger and then a huger event. And it's kind of like this one step backwards, 2 step forwards in an exponential rate of these events occurring where they're getting greater. And that in itself is a little daunting because it's somewhat the state of fear that it seems like the powers that shouldn't be continue to push us into, that it just creates this greater sense of fear. And I ponder if that is what brings about these cataclysmic events more so. My example I use is now that we have all these smartphones and all of these weather apps, when we look at our weather apps and you see the storm front, and then you look at your town, then you look at the storm front and you look at your town, well, you are manifesting and creating energy or thought or frequency to be, oh my God, that storm's going to hit my town. That storm's going to hit my town. That storm, and at what point, when you repeated it enough, does it happen? So
well, that is that.
Go ahead,
that's
sorry.
The mass media. That's why they want such control on the mass media to put out their different views and what they want people to think. Because the harness power of the mind is extremely powerful. This has been proven. This isn't speculation. The power of prayer. It's the power of positive thought. But, I've talked about faith before, and faith is believing that which is unseen and feeling it and knowing it. That's what faith is, and faith is very powerful. But there's an anti-faith. Anti-faith is fear. It's the opposite. It's the dark side of positive faith. If you're fearful, like you're talking about, oh no, look at the storm coming towards, and you're visualizing something that isn't even there, but you're seeing it in your mind. Oh, it's going to be like this, and oh no, that is anti-faith. And you will manifest that also. That is a form of creation. That's why we have to control our thoughts. And that's why there's such a battle for the minds of people in the world through television, radio, and all of this. And that's why there's such an attack against social media and independent media and independent thought forms that they can't control, because they know there's a tipping point. And they know that if the people get on board with an idea, things can change. Things can change. It's a battle for the minds, which are the energy source and the manifestors of our reality. Now, what we have to do, and here's the trick to all of this: if indeed things go odd, if indeed the Blue Kachina happens and we see the manifestations in the physical reality of all this stuff, we have to, as a collective, overcome that and know that it'll be a good thing. I was watching something strange, NeSe, before, like I said, before I came in the studio here. Let me see if I can find this, because it kind of caught me out of the blue where I saw this. Oh, here we go. It's a person named Allison Coe, C-O-E, and apparently she is a hypnotist. And she's been doing, working as a clinical hypnotist for a long time. And she started picking something up, something that she calls the event. And she's just like piecing all this stuff from all these hypnotic sessions that people are allowing her to tell, where they access us. And they're talking about this big event. It's like a wave of energy that hits the earth and changes everything. And that goes back to the Hopi, transformation from the fourth world to the fifth world. And like you were saying with the Anishinaabe, going into a new world. So there's a big event that happens, and not everybody stays. And they're talking about transforming into like 5D, fifth dimensional type reality here on Earth. And things are really wonderful. But it comes with this huge event, like it's described like a wave of energy that hits the earth that affects everybody. And that kind of fits in with the Hopi things also. But, I think it's kind of like where your heart's at, how this is all handled. But one thing for sure, collectively as a species, there is an anticipation energetically of a major change that's about to hit this earth one way or the other.
Well, and I know I bring up a lot of like TV movies and stuff like that, but I think that is part of like the conditioning, like the media entertainment to detained for something meant to enter you. But there is the movie Matrix, and in the Matrix 2, the lead character, Neo, meets the architect. And the architect talks about these 7 different matrices that were created for the humans. And he said that the very first matrix was made perfect. It was ultimate perfection. And the only problem was that we silly humans were never satisfied with perfection. That we couldn't handle it, that we were always wrapped up with, oh, this is too good to be true, this is good too, that we basically just ruined it for ourselves. And if you...
That thought,
Hi everyone, it's Chris Gio here, founder of...
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. Welcome back, second hour of Phoenix Rising Radio, right here on TFR. Hope you guys are doing well tonight. We're talking about the Hopi prophecies and the Blue Kachina, and the fact that we have the Chinese space station that is crashing back to Earth in between the 30th of March and the 2nd of April. And will this be a fulfillment of the Blue Kachina? Why don't you tell us some more about the Blue Kachina and what you know about this and what your people said about this, NeSe?
Well, the Anishinaabe people, we talk about the fire prophecies. And one of them, it's kind of argumented if we're in the 7th fire or going into the 8th fire. But my biggest thing is that when we think of a fire, most of the time we think about like a campfire. But if you think of where is the ultimate fire, but in the heavens, the sun is a huge fire. And so if you think about with this argument of the 7th and 8th fire, what if the 7th fire was where we're at right now with our sun, and then all of a sudden we see something that is illuminated in the sky, which is possibly another fire, which could possibly be the same as the Blue Kachina or the Red Kachina. And we talked about the Red Dragon and Wormwood and Nibiru. The speculation is boundless. But all of the indigenous people all have a common thread to all of their prophecies, that when this event occurs, that it will bring us back to balance. And if you think of that as a wiping of the slate clean, that would pretty much be a 0 point. That would be a new starting point. And do we need that? I would like to say no. Not at this moment, because I do still have faith in humane beings, that, as we stated before, the collective consciousness and the power of the mind, we don't know to what extent it is. It's almost like trying to figure out how a magnet works. To this day, we do not know scientifically how a magnet works. We can explain the physical attributes to it, but we still don't know how it works, because in the center of a magnet, as I talk about the Holy Trinity of positive, negative, and neutrality, within the very center of that neutrality, there is no magnetism. There's nothing. It's an emptiness. And imagine if we ourselves could get to that emptiness, to get to that meditative state of balance, where we're not getting wrapped up in the dichotomy of so far left or so far right, or the blue team or the red team or the male or the female, and work together to find this in a global balance. And it'd be nice if we could collectively come to this conclusion instead of reaching over and hitting the snooze button, like possibly this space station is one heck of an alarm going off that people are I don't know, ignoring, But the incredible thing I did realize is in the last day and a half, as I was researching the space station, you were not finding a lot of deep details about it. You could find a bunch of little clips and a bunch of little articles, but finding something that was really in depth about the whole thing of what's occurring, you had to really hunt and put things together to come up with a bigger picture of it.
I know. You know, the weird thing about it is years ago, the U.S. space station Skylab fell to the Earth. Actually, pieces of it hit out in Australia. A lot of it hit in the ocean. But I tell you what, everybody knew about that. That was big news. They were talking about it, the potential of where it could hit, all about it. It was a huge news thing. Everybody talked about it. I mean, heck, they sold T-shirts that said "I survived Skylab." I mean, and you know, it was global news. This is like an odd thing. Like, you know, you were kind of shocked when I told you last week. I'm like, you know, talking about the Blue Kachina and the Chinese space station. You're like, what? Wait a minute. What are you talking about? You hadn't even heard it yourself. So yeah, I agree. There's something weird with that. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I knew about the Kachina prophecies because there's many Kachinas, but when you told me about the Chinese, I knew the Chinese were launching satellites and stuff like that, but I didn't know they had a laboratory, a space laboratory, which really took me by surprise. And then when I researched it, you could find information a year ago where I think it was a year ago, March, I can't remember the date, where they lost control of it. And then in its irony, the question that I keep hearing in my head is, why is this not discussed to such fervor as the Skylab was? And then it made me think about the possibility of it being utilized as a Project Blue Beam incident or some kind of mass deception or distraction utilized for their agenda again.
And why? And see, that's the thing. It's coming up on, it's going to hit potentially the 30th through the 2nd. So, and again, this is an interesting time because we're rolling into a holiday weekend here. We have on the 30th at sundown, Passover begins, and also it's Good Friday. And Passover continues for 6 days all the way till April 6th. So this will occur on Passover, and not only on Passover, but the 70th anniversary of Israel, and also on Easter. We have Easter on Sunday, April 1st. So it's interesting that this is potentially happening over this highly energized religious time and a meaningful time for Israel. I don't know. It seems like they would want to play it up big time, or is it going to be a big surprise, or will it be a big nothing? You know,
Right?
Is it really something that they don't want people to know about? And that's where the conspiracy side of me comes in. It's like, you know, maybe this is really a big deal because it's lining up with all these things and they don't want to draw any attention to it. Because when they do want to draw attention to something, man, it is everywhere. You can't get away with it. So
Absolutely.
It also makes me look closer when it's like nobody's talking about, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I think you're onto something.
Well, and add to the fact of it too, we have our another full supermoon occurring on the 31st.
Yeah, it's a blue moon also. It's the second full moon of March, and so it will be a full moon, supermoon, and blue moon.
The second once in a blue moon.
The second once in a blue moon in a year. We had the first blue moon in January, no full moon in February, and this is the second blue moon of the year, and that'll be on the 31st, which is during Passover, 8:37 a.m. Eastern Time. If anyone's wondering, I have it on my calendar here. But again, I think we're entering a time right here, and I think it started yesterday, NeSe, that things are really going to get interesting here for the next couple of weeks. And I do believe this is the start of something. Could it be that this is a marker? And again, why aren't they talking about this? I mean, because this is big news. This could be a big news draw, a big read, could draw a lot of people in, all of that.
Well, and the other thing is how they're not really pinpointing specifics of where it could possibly crash. I was coming across stuff where it was talking about on the 45th parallel was where it was possibly going to crash. And then all of a sudden you hear another story where it talks possibly going into the southern hemisphere. And there's different possibilities of when this thing re-enters the atmosphere. The estimate that I kept hearing is between 20 and 40% of this space station is going to survive the burning up as it re-enters into our atmosphere. And the biggest scare of this re-entry is allegedly there is a toxic gas, over 200 pounds of this toxic gas that has a potential of erupting when this crash occurs.
Yeah, I've read the same. Extremely deadly chemicals, and it could land in a populated area. And again, that swath is so large. 43 degrees north, 43 degrees south. Seriously? A huge area of the Earth. And not only that, a large percentage of that huge area, the expanses, in between the continents, you have oceans, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So if you do it probability-wise, the probabilities are that there's a higher degree of probability it'll land in one of the oceans. The question is, will it be, Atlantic or Pacific? But again, we thought the high probability of the Skylab when it crashed was going to be in the ocean. But again, in one of the outback areas of Australia, wreckage did hit. Skylab actually did make groundfall in Australia.
Well, and then also, as you research about the space station, there's no specific pinpointing of when it was going to occur. They've been speculating that it was going to enter Earth's atmosphere, I think, for like the last 3-4 months. And that was the other thing that was, just one of those things that make you say, how can you not pinpoint this when we have supposedly this incredible science in NASA? But then you go back to the acronym of NASA.
I could see that because what is relying on now is disintegrating orbit and gravity. And I do know that there are different factors, gravitational fields, there are what's called gravitational anomalies around the Earth, and also that's affected by our solar conditioning and the effects that electric particles, charged particles hitting the Earth's atmosphere, and the effects on gravity and all of that. So I could see that. It's a really complex thing to calculate there.
Oh, well, absolutely, too. And when you look into it, if you really want to kind of freak yourself out a little bit, go and look up space debris in our atmosphere, because that was one of the first things that I pondered. Like, okay, now if this out of control space station is slowly, as it's free falling and getting closer and closer to our atmosphere, how much of that space junk is it nailing? And every time it collides with another piece of space junk, how is that going to change it off its course? And as it's entering our atmosphere and it's tumbling and pieces break off and pieces possibly explode, how is that also going to affect the trajectory as it falls?
Oh yeah, it could be anywhere. It's really hard to say exactly where it is. And what they said was like Now here's the weird thing. They were saying about a week before it comes in, they would have a better idea of where it's going to hit. Now, what they're talking about in the article that came out today that I read on the air just a moment ago was that this thing is going to be in between the 30th and the 2nd. So, hello, that's within a week, and they still don't have a good trajectory. They were saying they were going to be able to pinpoint it a little bit better within 7 days of the reentry, but now they've got a reentry time, and they have no idea still. So this thing's way, literally, no pun intended, way up in the air.
Well, going back to entertainment, there was a TV series called The West Wing. And in this TV series, there was this incident where there was a space shuttle that was stranded in the atmosphere and it was going to crash. And one of the cabinet advisors leaked to the media that the U.S. military had emergency rescue to high altitude what are they called when they're able to go back and forth?
Shuttle?
Not the shuttle, but they have like mini shuttles. That is an emergency reentry ship. And so then when they said this on the TV series, right away I go to the computer and I type in this stuff. And lo and behold, you find out of these militaristic shuttles. Some of them are unmanned and some of them are manned, where they are able to go up into these higher atmospheres.
X-37, the secret shuttle. A lot of people don't know about that, but we have a secret shuttle program that stays up for months at a time. And it goes up. It looks like the space shuttle. It's smaller, and it's a highly top secret thing that they put up. Some people say it's a weaponized platform. It could be anything, but it is a secret shuttle.
Right, and then that there goes with the questions of the how and the why, and then you research about how, with all of this space junk out there, how they're trying to figure out how do they get rid of all of this debris that's floating around. And the claim is, when they go to launch all of these satellites and stuff, and when they have to scrub a mission, it's not just because of it's willy-nilly. They're like, oh, we can't launch this anymore. They have to add into the flight plan all of this space junk that they are monitoring to make sure when they launch, there's no collisions that, could possibly destroy and ruin $1 trillion satellite.
There is a lot of space junk up there, and just tracking this stuff and knowing how to handle it, who could figure that out? And what will happen? It'll all eventually fall back to Earth at some point. It'll all get into a disintegrating orbit and fall back to Earth.
Well, the one thing I found interesting about the Chinese space station is that the accelerated rate that it is going around the globe, sorry, flat earthers, but it goes, I think it's 2 to 3 times in a day, in a 24-hour period, it encircles the Earth. And so that's traveling pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it just adds to the, where, not when, but because they know it's free falling in it. And yeah, a 48-hour window to me, I kind of have a challenge with that.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this stuff in space. I was talking about this X-37. And this is an article from 2017. It says the Air Force secret space shuttle has been in space 636 days with no plans to come back yet. And it says, despite some hints that the Air Force teeny reusable space plane, the X-37B, would be returning to Earth after a long secretive mission. It looks like that's not the case. And the little shuttle will continue to circle the globe, conducting its devious secret little experiments. The last mission, the X-37B, was 675 days. So we're not even in record territory yet, but that may still happen. It says this is the only fourth actual mission of the X-37B. There's been 2 of them, but since those missions tend to last so long, the spacecraft has amassed a pretty impressive record for time and space. Anyway, some of the diagrams shows that there's actually a place for a crew module that can go into this thing, a simple crew module where people can get in, do things, and get out, and they could actually intercept with like the ISS and different things. So what it is, the X-37B, we do not know. But you know what? I don't want to get too far away from the Blue Kachina. Let's get back into like what I said. You were going to tell us a little bit about the prophecies of your people. And
right. Sorry.
Anyways, no problem.
Well, to paraphrase the prophecies, it talks about how we will come into a time where the elders will no longer trust or remember the lessons that need to be taught, and that the children's shall return with a want of learning the ancestral ways. And when this period occurs, that people will make the choice of waking up and changing a direction to work together on a positive path where we will potentially make things right, collective consciousness move, or the cataclysmic event of where Mother Earth will, I guess, have her revenge for what we have done to her. Because if Mother Earth really was an entity, she should have dropped our pants and given us a spanking a while ago. And when this time occurs, there are some prophecies that says that our ancestors from the heavens shall be coming back and checking out whether or not we remain Anishinaabe or if we give up our sacred teachings. And it's kind of similar to the Revelations, or in Christianity when they talk about all of the, 4,400?
No, more than that. It's the armies of heaven. You're speaking of the 144,000, but they're on earth.
The rapture?
No, not the rapture. The 144,000 were saints on the earth that were like doing things here on earth. But the second coming of Christ is when Christ returns in the heavens with his armies. He comes with a sword. And, you know, a lot of the things were written in ancient biblical history by a lot of religions, talks about, you know, flying disc, a wheel within a wheel, flying shields, and how, you know, God and the angels came from the heavens. And his return from the heavens back to earth. So, you know, this entire idea, this prophecy, this belief that someone is coming back. Someone was here, they left, they're coming back. Everybody has a different version of it, wherever your culture is and whatever your religion basically is. But there's a common thread between all of that, that somebody was here from someplace else, they left, but they said they're coming back. And there's writings and teachings that they will be coming back. You know, some people have speculated that, you know, the creator, God, who created life on earth, is basically, you know, from heaven, and that heaven shall return. An interesting thing, NeSe, if you actually read the book of Revelation, it talks about heaven returning. People don't go to heaven. One of the basic tenets of Christianity, people think they go up to heaven. No, that's not the case. It says that the heavenly city will descend upon the earth. It's like a city that descends from the skies upon the earth. So that sounds pretty like Close Encounters of the Third Kind to me, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And is it romantic? Notion stories? Find out when you come back.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
No hate, no hype, no fear. Real people, real radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hello and hi. It is I, the original naysayer, along with Phoenix. Today we are talking about Hopi prophecies, space stations, and me being Chicken Little, because the sky is falling. The sky is falling. No, it's just the Chinese space station. But we're all lucky because we are so busy looking down into our phones that we will have the fortunate experience of being hit without seeing it coming. So at least I guess that's the good thing we can look forward to. But one thing I want to say, Phoenix, I have now been with you for a year. And I wanted to say thank you, Chi Miigwech, Niji. I appreciate the opportunity for you to allow me to babble on and Babylon. And my hopes are that I'm sharing information that will get people to critically think and remember that we are miracles and we all have something to share. And I am here if you need/want. And it's been an incredible journey and experience, as we call the Bima Dazi way we in. And thank you so much, Phoenix, for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, well, we have 30 minutes, like 27 minutes left. Again, tell me about the changing of the age, what you were told about it.
Well, the changing of the age, the changing of the guard, the reset, the resync, the finding balance, where as everything oscillates back and forth, at one point it may oscillate super duper awesome and then oscillate super duper bad. And at that bad point, major cataclysmic events can occur, have occurred, will, maybe, did. We will find out because it will be what it was. And the Anishinaabe, they say that this experience is going to happen. And the most ultimate thing that we could do for the betterment of our souls, our entity, our essence, our Manitou, is to find that balance within love, without fear, and accept things are what they are. But please do not get caught up in the belief that someone else is going to come and make it better for you. If you ultimately want things to be better, take check of yourself and see what you're doing to be part of the choice, to be the change for the positive, because that's the one definite thing we can do. We can still move our bodies and have them create or come into fruition what comes into our minds. So whether these prophecies are true or not, if they are able to motivate us silly entities to move forward positively, then so be it. Because I'm willing, I'm wanting, and like I said many times, I will feel my way to the highway that's a mile away from me right now, and I'll get on Highway 94, and you can all meet me in the Capitol if you're willing to help me, because I want to be the choice to make a change.
Well, we all have to be the choice to make a change. And, that's the trick in all of this. No matter what happens and what we see coming, it's been anticipated and looked for by a lot of people. But I do have to admit, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of things that are coming together right now that are larger than I've ever seen before. Things that are intersecting. And it's a good thing. This is what I've told a lot of our listeners in the past, and I want to stress with everything. No matter what we see coming up in the future here, no matter what we may see come to pass, we have to stay positive in all this. No matter how it may appear on the outside, is how we process this stuff, is how we'll deal with it. Some people won't process things too well. And if people are living in fear and they have doubts, it'll be amplified. So this is like the ultimate test, the ultimate life school thing for humanity as we see these things unfold and how we deal with this. It really is, NeSe. It's how we process these things as an individual.
Well, it's kind of like that expression that if you think you can't, and if you think you can, you're probably right. And it's that simplex, thank you, Ken Wielder. It's that simplex thinking that really gets us in trouble, where the simplest answer is probably the correct answer, but then we get caught up in that thinking process that we start questioning ourselves. And you heard me talk about the band Wookie Foot before. Mark Murphy has this really incredible line on that where it says, to find your heart, you have to lose your mind. And I just delight in that statement, because when we overthink things, and I'm not saying don't think, but when we overthink and we take so much time to come to a point of action, that we may have possibly missed the moment. And the only time that you can act is this moment. And that's why I get so frustrated with that statement that I hate, love, hate. Now is the time. Because time is an illusion, and now has already passed. And so what moment are you going to motivate?
True. What moment are you going to motivate? I want to motivate right now. And we should always, in the moment, motivate positive in the now.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say the change. Let's get into the positive, the positive side of all this. like in the Hopi prophecies, talking about how things are restored and good, and good comes out of this. And I mentioned a little bit before one of the breaks, I was talking about someone named Allison Coe, and what she had been saying, and she was talking about the 3D. And it's an interesting thing because this is something I just came across right before right before we came on the air. And she's been having all of these different patients for the past few months, and it's increased, talking about this event that's coming in, this big change. And it's almost like this wave that comes, and we've heard about this wave, this intergalactic wave that's coming, this energetic thing. And, I think a lot of it's an interpretation, and it could be interpreted by a lot of people a lot of different ways. Christianity could interpret it one way, Islam one way, New Age another way, pagan another way. This energetic that comes through, everybody could see it a different way, almost like the blind men trying to describe an elephant. A group of blind men were asked to describe what an elephant looks like. And, one blind man walked up and he touched the leg. He said, he goes, an elephant is like a strong and mighty tree. And the other man, touched the elephant's trunk. He said, no, the elephant is like a great and mighty snake. And the other man, he grabbed hold of the tail, and he's like, oh, no, you're both wrong. An elephant is like a strong rope that has life in it. And everybody described it differently because we, in our own perception, we see things. So it's interesting that people are seeing these events, these changes. Remote viewers see one thing. The Hopi prophecies saw one thing. John the Revelator in Revelations, he saw one thing. What exactly is it? But the interesting thing is, NeSe, that they all are describing basically one event. Just like all the blind men who couldn't see described an elephant, and they were all right. Nobody was wrong because it's all part of the big picture. And in the same way, I think we're seeing a lot of these ancient prophecies, remote viewing, these energetic things people are picking up. They're all right. They're just seeing it from a different angle and a different perspective of the picture.
Well, then that goes into that whole thing of the ego and getting wrapped up into semantics, because through our experiences, we are so caught in that paradigm of our truth, because there's your truth, my truth, and hopefully the compromise of the truth, as long as it propels us forward. But one thing that I want to really put out there is, even at the government's website of beprepared.gov, it says you should have 3 months of preparativeness in your cabinets. Unfortunately, because of Executive Order 13603, signed by Barack Obama, they can take all your stuff away from you if martial law is declared. But it's not a bad idea to be prepared. Don't get caught up in the fear of it, because being prepared, there is a sense of safety that you have, and of course you can't prepare for everything, but minimalistically, at least having, some good water source on hand, or Wade, just a basic filter, there's really easy, simple things that you can do for preparatory measures,
Yeah, basic preparedness. Extra food on hand, medications, what you may need, because there may be a bump in the road. We may face a bump in the road here, but again, it's not the end. I mean, even we're talking about prophecies and stuff. A lot of people, because of lack of knowledge of what these things say, really misinterpret things. They think like, the Battle of Armageddon, the end. They're talking about the end, or when Christ returns, the end. That's not the end. If you read the book of Revelation and what John the Revelator wrote, the Battle of Armageddon is part of the tribulation, and at the end of the tribulation, Christ returns. That's not the end of the world, because if you read what it says, the words, it says the city of heaven descends from the sky upon the earth, and then Christ sets up a millennial reign, 1,000 years, and he rules upon the earth. So if Christ comes back, if the Battle of Armageddon starts and everything kicks off, we get into the tribulation and Christ returns, that's not the end. You've got 1,000 years after that. So from the day Christ returns, you can mark 1,000 years to the end of the earth at least. And then it says there'll be a new earth. The old earth will go away, and there'll be a new earth and a new heaven. So everybody talks about the end of the world. They don't know what they're talking about. Even with the ancient Hopi prophecies, talking about going from the fourth world to the fifth world, this change. It's not the end of the world. So whenever you hear people talking about the end of the world, they don't know what they're talking about one bit.
Well, I'll be the first one to admit that I am absolutely ignorant when it comes to things I don't know.
Well, I think we all are. I think that is
a very true statement.
that we can all say.
Well, and that's where the challenge of ego comes in. That if we get so wrapped up in our ego to think that we know everything, it's going to be a challenge. And when we can look at each other and see the miracle of each other and respect each other in that respect of viewing, and I say it a lot, I'll believe it when I see it, but when we can come to a compromise and letting go of the ego, things are so much simpler. And it's so hard sometimes to be wrong, and harder even to have the integrity to admit the wrong. And my challenge, particularly, is I don't have a challenge with saying that I'm wrong, but I'm not going to come to that conclusion just because you say it. You better make sure you have your pie charts, your PowerPoint presentation, and your other modalities of a good discussion. But I'm absolutely fine with admitting I'm wrong, because more times than not, I would be happier with being wrong, because if I'm right, we're all in a heap of hurt.
And how do you say that? Why would be in that?
As the once Dick Gregory once said, if you would critically look in the mirror, we would all realize we all deserve the gun. Because we all, being honest with ourselves, can look back through our experiences and denote the times where we were acting completely selfish, with not the world in our forethoughts. I'm guilty of it, and I will atone to that. I will attune to that. I will find alignment with that. And that's when we make the action to correct the situation. And that's where it's, I never claim to be a righteous man. I just want to live a righteous life.
Yeah.
And to find the strength to do that isn't always easy.
No, it's not. Again, talking about the changes, this event going into a different energetic, what were the specific things that you were saying the Anishinaabe talked about this? The Hopi talked about it, about basically a new age, a new earth, and how things would be. Do you have any specifics about that?
Well, it correlates exactly the same. That Mother Earth will go through this change, and many people will shed their physical body, and we will have to regroup, and we will have to restart. And
It kind of fits with the theory of what they call the rapture, and the theory of the rapture. And by the way, people who aren't familiar, the word rapture does not occur in the Bible. In the Christian Bible, there's no such word as the rapture. That word came about, and we've talked about this before. The entire thought of the rapture or the transformation comes from the end of Revelation. It's talked about in Daniel, this change, and it talks about when Christ returns from the sky with his angels, his armies of heaven, that there will be a transformation, that the dead will be raised, and that people will be transformed. And the talk of a new heaven and a new earth, or a new energetic, it kind of fits in with this event where things physically change on Earth, and people go to what they call 5D, a higher vibration of reality, where things are different, things are more energetic, and something happens into another level, a different world, a new Earth. Now, is that what we're going to experience? How we're going to experience it? I don't know. There's been a lot of prophecy about it, ancient Native American prophecies, Christian prophecies, even, Islam, you name it. There's all types of talk and prophecy about this. And you yourself were talking about how people can energetically influence things. Well, when you're talking about an energetic and people consciously thinking about something, this is something that has been forefront in the human psyche for millennia. I mean, people have been talking about this for 1,000 years, and it's been building. So I think the probability of something along these lines happening in our lifetime, possibly soon, is pretty high. But it's not a scary thing. It's not a bad thing. And that's what I want to drive home with everybody, that these things can change. Because if we truly do go through an energetic where things change, and it can happen from energies doing this, all kinds of stuff can happen. I mean, dude, you're rolling around in a wheelchair. How would you like it if, like, all of a sudden you look outside, you see this, like, violet looking cloud, or like some weird energy rolling across the landscape, and boom, all of a sudden there's a sonic boom, and everybody hits the dirt, and everybody kind of clocks out, and all of a sudden you come to and you like jump up and you're like, what happened? And all of a sudden you realize, you're like, oh man, I'm not in my wheelchair anymore, my eyes work. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about things that can energetically change the reality that we're in. That's a new age, going into a new world, a revelation, an apocalypse, a rapture. You know what I mean?
The whole scientific denotation, or it's all theoretical science. There is no absolute in science, but the definition of science is more or less using a critical thinking guideline to come to a conclusion of your best theory and outcome. And if we look at some of the scientific stuff that has been brought to our attention, and the fact that our brain is this incredible electromagnetic complex machine, that the effects of other electromagnetic machines and occurrences can affect us. And with what our heavenly sun currently is going through, with all of these major solar occurrences, the possibility of an event occurring where electromagnetically our brains would turn on the estimated 90% that we don't use, which is kind of similar to what they talk about dark matter, that they know what some of the matter is, but then there's dark matter. It's almost the same as above, so as below. Our brains, we utilize 10% of our brains, and 90% of it is what? Imagine if we could turn that on.
Well, that's what in theory, that's what this is potentially, this new world, this new thing that the Blue Kachina or the falling of the space station possibly could be heralding as a signpost that guess what? This is about to happen, and that stuff is about to be clicked on. So it's not something bad. There's going to be some shaking. There's going to be some fallout because you have a lot of bad actors running around the world that type of energetic will no longer be accepted in reality. It'd be like, no, that operation no longer works in this energetic. That vibration, that low vibration of hate and warfare and all of that won't make it. And people try to act out in that, basically go a different direction. Anyway, we've only got like a minute left till we're out of here. What would you like to say to everybody before we roll out?
Sometimes the dark and the unknown can be scary, but we're going through it together, and together we can have it all. Is whether or not you want to make the choice to be the change. But if you want to hear me babbling on more in Babylon, you can go to one or two YouTube pages, Hilarious NeSe, NeSe, or Cannabis Res Solution. And you can hear me hours and hours of babbling on in Babylon. And thank you again, Phoenix, for a wonderful year.
You're welcome, NeSe. It's been a pleasure. And everybody else, I'll be back on Thursday with Bob Gilpatrick of Boomers. And be sure to tune in because it should be a really good program. And that's it. We're out of here. Say no to fear and say yes to love. Find someone you love. Tell them that you love them. That's it. Good night. God bless everyone.
Ape Gish Bimad Ziwe Win. Toodles.